Welcome back to Fresh Movie Recaps. Today, we're going to recap an action comedy sport movie from 2012 called Here Comes the Boom, starring Kevin James. The movie kicks off with Scott, who's running late for his class because he overslept. He hastily bikes to school, narrowly avoiding a truck on the way. Upon reaching the closed school gate and wanting to avoid drawing attention, he's compelled to sneak into the classroom through a window. To his surprise, Principal Betcher is already present in the classroom, so Scott pretends to be giving a lesson about the birth of baby antelope. As a punishment for his untidiness, the principal gives him bus duty for the day. Throughout the class, he completely neglects his students, allowing them to do as they please. After class, he watches the music lesson conducted by Marty. As he ends the lesson, he gives them a quote that, without music, life would be a mistake. Scott approaches Marty and invents a story to assign him bus duty, but Marty's mind is elsewhere, consumed by the news of his wife's pregnancy. In a meeting, he sees Bella, his only motivation. He shows at work by bugging this school nurse to go out on a date, to which she repeatedly turns him down 16 times. Betcher informs everyone of proposed budget cuts. The school cannot afford to continue extracurricular activities, including the music program, which would result in Marty being fired. Scott intervenes and tells Betcher to give Marty a break because he is expecting a child. After learning that the school needs $48,000 to continue the music program, Scott suggests they raise the money. They have arranged a meeting with all the teachers to help raise the money, but only the school nurse, Bella, shows up. When Marty goes to the cafeteria to round up the other teachers, Scott tells Bella it's unrealistic to raise so much money, but she will not let him give up on Marty. He takes the opportunity to make a move on her, but she just sighs, 17th attempt turned down. So he suggests that she will have dinner with him if he can dunk the ball in the hoop. She agrees, thinking that he will surely fail because of his size. Sneaky Scott. He takes a mini trampoline and jumps with enough distance, but still fails to dunk the ball. Later in the day, Scott pays a visit to his carefree brother. During the visit, he asks if there's any extra work available at his brother's place, with the aim of earning some money to take on any available opportunity. Unfortunately, his brother informs him that they recently had to lay off 2 employees. Scott undertakes night shifts instructing a course designed to help individuals prepare for the citizenship exam. After the class, Scott receives his paycheck, which seems to disappoint him. At that moment, one of his students named Nico approaches him, expressing concern about failing the class and potentially being sent back to his home country. Scott initially declines, but later has a change of heart, agreeing to help Nico, much to Nico's delight. Later, Scott visits Nico at his apartment and discovers that Nico is a martial arts coach with a background in UFC fighting. Before they begin their tutoring session, Nico invites Scott to watch a match. During the match, Nico's friend mentions that the loser of the fight earned $10,000, which surprises Scott. Nico adds, if he had won, he would have made $50,000. At that moment, an idea strikes Scott. The next day, Scott shares with Marty the idea of participating in a fight. He points out that he would fight to lose. Marty hesitates but eventually agrees. During the citizenship test preparation class, Scott announces his intention to resign. However, outside of the class, he approaches Nico and proposes a deal. He offers to tutor Nico in exchange for martial arts training. Although Nico is initially hesitant, telling him that he is too old, he eventually agrees and informs Scott about an upcoming fight happening that week in which Scott must participate. The following day, Scott works out with Marty in his basement. When they take a break, Marty suggests defeating Scott's opponent before the fight has even begun. Scott reaches the MMA's lowest tier, which surprises Nico, but Nico recognizes Scott's determination. Moreover, Scott is the next fighter scheduled. He dons an eccentric outfit intended to appear intimidating and makes his entrance into the ring to the tune of Here Comes the Boom. His opponent seems equally unprepared to win. Regrettably, the fight concludes in a mere 2 seconds, and medics quickly attend to Scott. Nonetheless, despite the brief fight, he manages to earn $750. Later, Bella scolds him for his foolish decision to fight in a cage. She tells him that Marty will understand that he has failed to raise the money. Once again, he tries to make a pass at her, unsuccessfully. Afterward, he pays a visit to Marty's residence, finding Marty absent. Scott discovers that Marty hadn't informed his wife about the potential job loss, intensifying the pressure on Scott to come up with the $48,000. He takes the $750 he made in the first fight to school and gives it to Elkins, the vice principal. The following day, Scott pays a visit to Nico at his workplace, where he's instructing a street fighting style infused with disco elements. Nico confidently affirms that the skills they're about to acquire are essential for the cage. He teaches him techniques for defensive maneuvers and escaping chokeholds, highlighting Scott's novice status in this context. Recognizing Scott's inexperience, Nico decides they'll have to improvise and swiftly returns to teaching his next class. In his second MMA fight, Scott takes a good beating. At the end of the first round, Marty forgot to bring a stool, so he decides to lie down, which is against the rule, but manages to keep the fight going until the third round. Then it starts pouring, and both fighters cannot maneuver properly. The whole fight looks silly that both Nico and Marty laugh at the whole episode, but still ends up with Scott losing. While en route to their next fight, Scott takes the opportunity to tutor Nico and discovers that Marty inadvertently left his lunch behind. However, this isn't a major issue as he has applesauce with him. Just before the fight, Nico offers Scott an encouraging pep talk, but they're caught off guard when their entrance song plays earlier than expected. To their surprise, their opponent also uses the same song, but his entrance is far more spectacular. Scott points out the awkwardness of sharing the same song and requests that Marty make a change. Marty complies, swapping the song for something classical, resulting in a rather lackluster and uncomfortable entrance for Scott and Nico. The fight starts with Scott taking a beating as usual with punches in the face and elbows, yet not holding up his defense, and Nico just yelling at him to stick to the game plan. In the first round, he is saved by the bell. Scott has had it with defense. When his opponent takes a moment to show off as if he's already won the fight, Scott swings a right hook which knocks him out. Scott finally got his first win. To top it all off, the applesauce came out. Word has spread around the school, and Scott is famous, not necessarily for the fight itself, but for the applesauce. Malia considers him a hero for doing his best to save the music program. The students' expectations are placed on him, calling him a hero in the music department, and that motivates him even more. Afterward, Bella attends to his wounds and discovers that he has earned $3,000 from the fights up to that point. She contributes her $72 from the bake sale. Once more, he attempts to invite her out on a date, but again, she declines his offer. Nico is training Scott, who becomes frustrated because Nico is primarily teaching him self-defense. Scott desires to be more aggressive, believing that winning fights will lead to fewer confrontations. Nico eventually agrees and introduces Scott to his friend called Guy. Guy decides to test Scott's abilities by having him face two opponents simultaneously. Scott takes a severe beating, but Nico and Guy find it funny. They even bring in another fighter to join in on the fun. Despite being cornered and outnumbered, Scott refuses to surrender and insists on continuing the fight. This determination convinces Guy that he can indeed train Scott. Scott is determined to take his teaching role seriously, even though the class perceives him as indifferent. To get their attention, he stands on his desk to capture everyone's attention and starts delivering captivating lessons on biology, earning the admiration of his students. Bella, hearing the excitement from the hallway, is delighted to witness Scott's humorous side. Meanwhile, Scott continues his training on the bleachers with Marty, while Malia assists Nico in preparing for his citizenship test by creating a song to help him remember the answers. Nico is deeply impressed by her creativity. As Scott wins more fights, he donates the earnings to Becher's counselor. His teaching endeavors are thriving, and he remains committed to his training. Guy imparts his knowledge of offense to Scott, although some fights still prove challenging. The news of Scott fighting for a noble cause quickly spreads throughout the school, sparking excitement in Marty and disbelief from Becher's counselor, whom he gives more money. Scott, feeling confident, invites Bella for dinner at his place, and she finally agrees. His brother cooks an exclusive dinner for them. Bella loves it, but when Scott says he made it, she can tell it's a lie, but says that the dinner is really amazing. A few wine glasses later, Bella starts criticizing how he gives up quickly in a fight, yet he has been stubborn with her as a mule, asking her out for a date. Scott tries to show her some moves he learned in MMA. That leads to a pretend fight where Bella pounces on him with closed fists. The following day, Scott thanks his brother for the dinner and assists him in securing a job. Meanwhile, Guy tracks down Scott at school with some exciting news. Joe Rogan has extended an offer for a UFC fight, promising a $10,000 payout even if Scott loses. However, Nico declined the offer on Scott's behalf. To discuss this further, Scott visits Nico during his yoga class. They're just $6,000 short of their $48,000 goal. Scott considers taking the fight as a quick solution, but Nico argues that it's too perilous. Nico had rejected the opportunity due to personal reasons. He had suffered a career-ending injury while preparing for a UFC match. Nevertheless, Nico recognizes Scott's deserving of this chance and pledges to arrange the fight. Scott and Nico meet Joe and discuss the details of the fight. Joe has heard Scott's reason for fighting and thinks he is very chivalrous, so he gives him this opportunity. Nico says Scott is ready, and they agree to meet in Vegas for the fight. At the airport, they celebrate being near their fundraising goal, and Marty's wife expresses her gratitude profusely. He tries to kiss Bella, but they are distracted by Marty playing their theme song on a guitar. They rush onto the plane and eventually land in Las Vegas. While enjoying a cheesecake, Nico takes on more than he can handle, leading to a playful food fight. Meanwhile, Scott receives a call from Bella, who informs him about a case of embezzlement at the school by Elkins and that he was even arrested. The assistant had pilfered all the funds they had raised for the music program. Bella pleads with him to return, but Scott realizes he can't turn back at this crucial moment. Scott's opponent proves to be a ferocious and formidable fighter. Marty is devastated upon learning about the embezzlement, but Scott remains resolute. His strategy is clear: win the fight and secure the $50,000 prize. As the fight is on the verge of commencing, the usual "Here Comes the Boom" anthem is replaced with a different tune. Malia arrives with the school's music band to boost Scott's spirits, a thoughtful arrangement orchestrated by Bella with Joe's assistance. The biology teacher is making his debut in the UFC, captivating the attention and enthusiasm of everyone present. With Ken, known as the executioner, on one side and Scott, the biology teacher, on the other, the fight appears to be an unfair fight. As the announcements are going on, he glances over at the music class. His students at school and the citizenship class are gathered together to watch the fight live on their screens. He has a cause to fight for. Nico tells Scott to lose as quickly as possible so he doesn't get injured, but that's when he reveals he's winning the fight. As rules are read, Ken disrespects Scott right off. As the fight kicks off, Ken delivers a one huge Superman punch right off the gate to Scott, who quickly finds himself on the defensive, unable to maintain his guard as he's forced into a corner. Scott endures a barrage of punches in the first round, somehow managing to remain conscious. No matter what Scott has learned, Ken possesses superior knowledge. He tells them is so fast and flush. The second round unfolds similarly, with Ken unleashing a more of flashy moves that pummel Scott. On the ground, everyone seems to be losing any hope of him surviving the executioner Ken. He's barely able to stay on his feet and even becomes so disoriented that he mistakenly heads toward the wrong corner. Marty reassures him that regardless of the outcome, Scott has already achieved enough. He's become Marty's hero. In the third and final round, Ken extends a gesture of respect to Scott. The round begins with Scott dodging a few jabs from Ken, even successfully countering one. Seizing this opening, Scott maneuvers Ken into a corner, delivering a string of punches. Following a remarkable kick, Scott brings Ken to the ground and continues with a flurry of punches. In a critical moment, Ken manages to lock Scott in an arm hold. Astonishingly, Scott manages to go back in his grip, lifts Ken, drops him, and ultimately knocks him out. Scott emerges as the victor, a truly astonishing sight, a biology teacher triumphing in a UFC fight. The crowd, everyone watching the fight, goes crazy, the sound becoming deafening. Scott and Bella finally share a kiss through the cage. The music program is saved, Marty is happy, and even Betcher is grateful to Scott for his generous donation. Nico and others have received their citizenship. Thank you for watching Fresh Movie Recaps.